The final hour, the sterile white walls of Ward 7 had become Mira's entire world. At 17, she should have been worried about college applications or first dates, not the alien pathogen slowly consuming her from within. The Xerathi infection had been spreading through human colonies for months, and no one, not the brightest xenobiologists or the most advanced medical eyes, had found a cure. Dr. Marcus Holloway checked her vitals for the 100th time that hour, his weathered face betraying nothing but professional concern. Behind him, Nurse Yuki Tanaka prepared another round of painkillers, though they both knew was merely prolonging the inevitable. The infection had reached her brain stem. Minutes, maybe an hour at most. How is she? The gravelly voice belonged to Captain Jeremiah Cross, Mira's guardian since her parents died in the initial Xerathi outbreak on Kepler 442b. His military bearing couldn't hide the tremor in his hands as he gripped the doorframe. "The same," Holloway replied softly. "I'm sorry, Captain. We've exhausted every option." In the corner of the room, something stirred. Kaelith had been motionless for hours, his obsidian scales dulled with what everyone assumed was grief. The dragon-like creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, even when resting, his serpentine neck allowing his head to hover protectively over Mira's bed. Biosymbiotic species were rare, and the bond between human and dragon was poorly understood by science. Most believed it was purely emotional, a telepathic connection that allowed for perfect companionship. But as Mira's breathing became more labored, Kaelith's eyes began to glow with an inner fire that made the monitoring equipment flicker. His massive chest expanded and contracted in rhythm with hers, as if he were breathing for both of them. "Doctor," Tanaka whispered, pointing at the creature, "look at his scales." Patterns of bioluminescence rippled across Kaelith's hide knot. The simple emotional displays they'd observed before, but complex geometries that seemed to pulse with purpose. Ancient symbols that predated human contact with his species by millennia. The temperature in the room began to rise, and the air itself seemed to thicken with an energy that made their skin crawl. Medical equipment started beeping erratically as electromagnetic interference filled the space. "Everyone out," Holloway ordered, but his feet remained planted. Something was happening, something that defied every law of biology he understood. Kaelith's head turned toward Mira, and for the first time since the bonding ceremony 3 years ago, he made a sound. Not the gentle rumble of contentment they knew, but a low, haunting note that seemed to resonate from the very core of his being. The machines showed, Mira's heart stopping, and that's when Kaelith began to change. The transformation begins the moment. Mira's heart flatlined. Kaelith's entire body erupted in brilliant patterns of light. The bioluminescence spread across his scales like liquid fire, each symbol more complex than anything in xenobiological databases. The restraints that had kept him calm during visiting hours titanium steel, cables rated for creatures 3 times, his size snapped like paper as his muscles swelled with impossible strength. "Get back," Cross shouted, drawing his sidearm on. Instinct, though he'd never pointed at the creature who'd been like family for 3 years. The captain had seen combat on 17 worlds, but nothing had prepared him for the raw power radiating from Kaelith's form. Dr. Holloway fumbled for his communicator. "Security to Ward 7. Medical emergency." But the device crackled with static, its circuits overwhelmed by the electromagnetic storm emanating from the dragon. Kaelith's neck extended, bringing his massive head down to rest against Mira's forehead. The moment they touched, the girl's body began to convulse. Not the random spasms of system failure, but rhythmic contractions, as if something were rebuilding her from within. The machines. Tanaka gasped, staring at the monitors. Despite showing cardiac arrest moments before, new readings were appearing impossible readings. Brain activity off the charts, cellular regeneration at rates that should have killed her, and something else entirely. Her DNA was rewriting itself in real time. Kaelith's breathing became labored, each exhale accompanied by wisps of luminous vapor that settled on Myra's skin and seemed to absorb into her pores. Where the mist touched, her pale complexion took on a subtle metallic sheen, and the dark veins of infection beneath her skin began to silver. "What is he doing to her?" Cross demanded, though he made no move to intervene. Something primal in his soldier's instincts warned him that interrupting this process would be catastrophic. The dragon's eyes, usually a warm amber, had turned a brilliant white that seemed to look through rather than at the world around him. When he opened his mouth, the resonant hum that emerged wasn't just sound, it was pure energy, vibrating at frequencies that made the hospital's reinforced walls groan in protest. Windows throughout the ward began to crack. In the corridor outside, other patients' monitors went haywire as the phenomenon spread beyond the room. The building's AI systems crashed one by one, unable to process the impossible data streams. Through it all, Kaelith never broke contact with Mira. His massive frame, which had always seemed so powerful and eternal, was visibly diminishing. Scales dulled and fell away, revealing raw flesh beneath. His breathing became more ragged with each passing moment, but Myra's transformation accelerated. Her wounds sealed without scars, her emaciated frame filled out with new muscle and bone density, and most disturbing of all, her closed eyelids began to show the same patterns of bioluminescence that covered Kaelith's dying form. "He's not healing her," Holloway whispered in horrified understanding. "He's changing her into something else entirely." The building shook as Kaelith's harmonic frequency reached a crescendo that shattered every piece of glass in the ward. Emergency lighting flickered and died, leaving only the dragon's bioluminescent patterns to illuminate the scene. His massive body had wrapped entirely around Myra's hospital bed, forming a cocoon of scales and desperate love. Dr. Holloway's scanner trembled in his hands as he tried to take readings through the electromagnetic storm. What he saw made his knees buckle. "Captain, look at this. Her cellular structure, it's not human anymore. Not entirely." Cross squinted at the display through the strobing light. Myra's DNA was rewriting itself, but not randomly. New sequences were being inserted with surgical precision, genetic code that matched no known species in the galactic database. And with each addition, Kaelith's own genetic signature grew weaker. "He's giving her his DNA," Tanaka breathed. "But how is that possible? Interspecies genetic transfer doesn't work like this. The proteins, the amino acid sequences, they're completely incompatible." Kaelith's answer came not in words, but in images that flooded their minds. Suddenly they could see through his eyes, feel what he felt. The biosymbiotic bond hadn't been emotional at all. It had been preparing for this moment. For 3 years, he had been studying Myra's genetic structure, learning how to bridge the impossible gap between their species. The Xerthi infection hadn't been killing her. It had been changing her, preparing her body to accept what was coming. The pathogen wasn't alien at all. It was ancient dragon biotechnology, dormant in their genetic code for millennia, waiting for the right catalyst. "My God," Holloway gasped. As the revelation hit him, the dragons aren't just bonding with humans. They're evolving us. Kaelith's great heart stuttered, and his grip on Mira loosened slightly. The patterns on his scales flickered like dying stars. He was fading fast, his life force transferring to her with each passing second. But his sacrifice was working. Myra's vital signs weren't just stable, they were enhanced beyond human norms. Her bone density had increased threefold. Her muscle fibers were restructuring into something more efficient, more durable. Her brain scans showed new neural pathways forming, entire sections lighting up that had never been active in baseline humans. Most disturbing of all, her fingernails had hardened into claws, and small scales were beginning to form along her spine. "We need to stop this," Cross said, reaching for his weapon again. But even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The process had passed the point of no return. Kaelith's breathing slowed to almost nothing, but his eyes remained fixed on Mira's face with an intensity that spoke of absolute purpose. In his final moments, he wasn't just saving her life, he was creating something new, something that had never existed before, a hybrid, part human, part dragon, and potentially more powerful than either species alone. The question that none of them dared voice was simple. What would she become when she woke up? The price of life. Kaelith's final breath escaped as a whisper of golden light that settled into Mira's skin like morning dew. His massive form, once proud and magnificent, crumbled to ash that sparkled with residual bioluminescence before fading to ordinary gray. The sudden silence felt deafening after hours of his resonant humming. For a moment, nothing moved in the eye. Ruined ward. Then Mira's eyes snapped open, and everyone in the room took an involuntary step backward. Her irises had changed from brown to a swirling mixture of gold and silver that seemed to move with their own liquid intelligence. When she sat up, her movements were too fluid, too controlled for someone who had been dying moments before. The hospital gown hung in tatters around her transformed physique, broader shoulders, longer limbs, and a spine that curved in ways human anatomy shouldn't allow. "Mira?" Cross's voice cracked as he spoke her name. "Sweetheart, how do you feel?" She turned toward him, and he saw recognition in those alien eyes. But there was something else, too, an ancient wisdom that hadn't been there before, as if Kaelith's memories had become part of her consciousness. "I remember everything," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the remaining equipment buzz with feedback. "Not just my life, his species' history, the truth about what we've become." Dr. Holloway approached cautiously, his medical scanner beeping frantically as it tried to catalog her new biology. Her body temperature had stabilized at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, her heart rate at an impossibly slow 15 beats per minute, and her brain activity showed patterns never recorded in any sentient species. "The infection," he began, but Mira shook her head. There was no infection. That was preparation. The dragons have been guiding human evolution for centuries, waiting for the right generation to accept the joining. Kaelith chose me before. I even knew he existed." She stood, and they could see the full extent of her transformation. Her height had increased by nearly 6 inches. Her muscle definition was perfect without being bulky, and the scales along her spine caught the emergency, lighting like polished gemstones. "But why?" Tanaka asked. "Why change us?" Mira's expression darkened, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of species-spanning knowledge. "Because something is coming. Something that neither humans nor dragons could face alone. The Zirathi weren't the first invasion force. They were scouts. The real threat is still decades away, but when it arrives..." She trailed off, her new senses apparently detecting something the others couldn't. Her head tilted, listening to frequencies beyond human perception. "There will be others like me. The process has already begun on 17 worlds. Kaelith's sacrifice was just the first. We're not just hybrids, we're prototypes for humanity's next evolutionary step." Cross felt his military instincts screaming warnings. What kind of threat requires this kind of preparation? Mira's gold-silver eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw flashes of impossible things, vast ships that devoured planets, creatures of living darkness that consumed entire star systems. A war that had been raging across the galaxy long before. Humans learned to make fire. "The kind," she said softly, "that has already destroyed 1,000 civilizations." Outside the hospital, 3 more dragons began to sing their death songs. What she had become 6 months after Kaelith's sacrifice. Mira stood before the Galactic Council in chambers built to accommodate species from across known space. Her transformation had continued slowly but relentlessly, the scales now formed. Intricate patterns along her arms and neck, her eyes held depths that seemed infinite, and when she spoke, her words carried the harmonic resonance that made even the most skeptical counselors listen. The hybrid program has produced 47 successful transformations, she reported, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber without technological amplification. Each bonded pair that completes the process adds to our understanding of what's required to face the Devourers. Admiral Zhao Wei, Earth's military representative, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The creature before them had once been human, but everything from her posture to her speech patterns suggested something far more complex now. And the cost? 47 dragons dead, 47 humans ... changed. How do we know this sacrifice is worth it? Mira's expression remained patient, though those around her could feel the power radiating from her transformed form. Because I've seen their memories, Admiral. Every dragon carries genetic knowledge spanning millions of years. The Devourers have consumed entire galactic civilizations. The Andromedans, the Helix Collective, the Crystal Dynasties all gone. We're not the first species to attempt hybridization as a defense. We're just the first to succeed. Dr. Holloway, now leading the Hybrid Research Division, stepped forward with his latest data. The transformed individuals show capabilities that exceed both parent species. Enhanced strength, speed, and intelligence. Yes, but more importantly, they can perceive and manipulate dimensional frequencies that the Devourers use for travel. The council erupted in dozens of languages, but Mira's raised hand brought immediate silence. The gesture hadn't been threatening, but the subtle display of authority was unmistakable. The question isn't whether we should continue, she said. Calmly, the question is whether we can transform enough humans before they arrive. Our projections suggest we have 18 years, maybe 20. We need at least 10,000 hybrids to have a fighting chance. Counselor Vex High, whose crystalline species had survived the Devourer's last incursion by hiding in subspace, clicked. His approval. The mathematics support her analysis. But can human society accept 10,000 individuals like this? Mira smiled, and for a moment her hybrid nature was forgotten as something purely human shone through. Humanity has always adapted. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and the transition to a galactic civilization. We'll survive this too. She paused, her enhanced senses detecting something others couldn't. Besides, we won't be alone. The dragons left us more than just genetic modifications. In the observation deck above the chambers, 46 other hybrids stood in perfect formation. Each bore the unique characteristics of their dragon partner's sacrifice, but all shared the same determined expression. They weren't human anymore, but they hadn't lost their humanity either. They were something new, something that could stand against the dark between the stars. As the council voted to expand the hybrid program, Mira touched the small-scale pendant. Around her neck all that remained of Kaelith's physical form. His sacrifice had given her life, but more than that, it had given humanity hope. The Devourers were coming, but when they arrived, they would find something they had never encountered before. A species that refused to face extinction alone, willing to transform itself rather than submit to the darkness. And in that transformation, perhaps they would discover that the greatest strength wasn't in remaining unchanged, but in becoming something greater than the sum of their parts.